But then a couple things happened. Number one, Japan then came and built factories in Tennessee, and it measures very carefully the productivity of its line workers. And the Tennessee people achieved 98% of the productivity of the Japanese workers. And so, yeah, the Japanese workers were 2-ish% more productive. But that's nothing.
That's fine.
And that's fine. In most manufacturing industries, American was actually the line workers were more productive than in Japan by a little, again, by a small amount. We get this inferiority complex, like our workers just suck. But no, it's institutions and it's the ecosystem. It's the suppliers, it's the markets, it's the, blah, blah.
One thing that I think he does that is extremely important, he iterates rapidly, right? And it's sort of like SpaceX is known for taking like a capital rich approach to development, where they, on Starship, they have like a bunch of prototypes that blew up kind of on purpose. Like they knew they would probably blow up. It's a highly iterative approach where like you allow yourself to fail if necessary, and then you make the tweaks and adjustments to on engineering. You kind of figure out what went wrong. There is no safety regulation, right? Or like very little. And like you are allowed to like put out like a half-baked product and try it and field it and see if it fails. Large parts of the economy, you can't do that.
Welcome to Econ 102, where economist Noah Smith and I make sense of what's happening in the news, technology, business, and beyond through the lens of economics. Let's jump right in. Eli, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be on with you guys.
Eli, I thought we'd start with, is the Great Stagnation over? Maybe you can give a brief description for people who are unfamiliar with that concept, and then get into where are we?
Yeah, so the Great Stagnation is a slowdown in the rate of total factor productivity growth that began in around 1973. So for the like 50 years prior to that, we had grown at about 2% per year in TFP growth. And in the sort of early to mid 70s, it shifted to another regime of like 0.5% a year. And we had a brief like decade of fast growth again in 1995 to 2005. And since 2005, it's been pretty abysmal growth. It's 0.3% TFP growth per year, basically ever since then. And like, no, it's not over. It's like still happening. Not least because like the data still shows it's still happening. Like we're growing slowly in terms of TFP as far as we can tell. But then I think like the other thing about it is that I think people mistakenly think it's like a technology thing, like in the sense of like new inventions or whatever. But I think it's actually like a governance thing. We're making it actually like unduly challenging to deploy new technologies that we invent, or to scale, or to iterate, or to take the new ideas and make them like scale up to the point where they can actually like start to have an economic impact. Because like an idea, like at the time that you invent it, makes zero economic impact. It like only can make an impact if like everybody starts using it. So and I think it's like that's where the process is really being held up. It's not like we don't have any science porn. We have plenty of science porn on the internet. Lots of cool things happening, but like the Great Stagnation like still going on. That's my take.
Noah, where do you stand? How do you react to that?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think, back in like maybe the 1980s or something, there was this idea that TFP was actually just how much stuff gets invented this week. But I think we've moved well beyond that, and we realized that diffusion of innovation and its impact on the overall economic ecosystem is what really translates technology into growth, abundance, and all this stuff. And I think that idea has sunk into economics a while ago. TFP data is really bad, and I'm really annoyed by it. And there's a number of bad things about it. Number one, there's the inherent difficulty of calculating it, because for those who don't know, to calculate total factor productivity, you need to calculate you take output like GDP, however much stuff we're producing, and then you kind of net out the contributions from labor and capital. Right? You're like, okay, well, how much of this was just we got more people? That's actually pretty easy to net out, honestly. So that's why labor productivity is a pretty clear statistic. But then netting out the contribution from capital is actually really hard because there's a million problems with it. Like, what if you use the machines for more hours a day? Like, how do machines combine with humans in the production function and things like that? And also the data sources that we have are not even very great. So the thing about TFP data is, like, it's not bad for looking back on a whole, like decade or 2 decades, but for looking at how well things did this year, it's useless. Even if you look at John Fernald, there's this guy at the San Francisco Fed who tries very, very, very hard to use a whole bunch of fancy tricks to like make TFP a thing you can use year to year, and it's just an insurmountable task, I think. So basically, TFP is not that great. Instead, I look at labor productivity as a good short-term indicator. Labor productivity can get distorted. For example, if you have a big recession, you fire a bunch of the lowest paid workers, it looks like your labor productivity spikes, but it didn't really. It's just that you couldn't afford to keep the less productive workers on. And so there, it's messy for a lot of reasons, but looking at labor productivity growth in a boom is actually pretty good, because if your labor productivity is growing even though everyone has a job, it's not from composition effects, right? It's not from hiring a whole bunch more, checkout clerks. Not trying to throw any shade on checkout clerks here. I was one at one point, but the point is that labor productivity is actually decent, and labor productivity really, really jumped right in the wake of the pandemic, then kind of slumped, and is now actually doing all right again. So we're seeing rapid labor productivity growth the last couple quarters. And so that's good. I don't know that makes a roaring 20s decade, or I don't know how closely to connect this to technology, but what we can connect it to is investment in factories. We see massively increasing investment in factories, especially in 2 areas, in semiconductors and in green technology, solar and batteries, and especially batteries especially. And you say, okay, well, is that, we know that's where we're doing industrial policy, right? That's where we're doing the IRA, the CHIPS Act, stuff like that. Is that it? Is it just government says, okay, guys, we'll pay you to make these factories? So everyone's like, okay, I'll make the factory. Well, yeah, to some extent. But then when you look into the actual specifics of the technological developments in those areas, you also see that there's been massive technological developments in those areas. You see that batteries have become insanely cheaper and their energy density has become insanely higher. So the quality of these things and the cost are, on both these metrics, they're really just improving. That's even before bringing new kinds of batteries into the equation. Scaling of innovation is really happening. Obviously, solar, we saw the massive cost decline. That's not even a story anymore. And some other things too, like electrolyzers for green hydrogen, are on this exponentially, improving path. And so we see these real technological, things that are happening. It's not the boom in construction of green technology is not, being driven just by the government saying, we'll pay you to make a bunch of this stuff, because the stuff actually got better. And so I think that there is a case that we're looking at a technology-driven productivity boom right now, not necessarily of the size that we were looking at in, say, the 1950s, but, not nothing either. That's my thought.
I mean, the thing I would push back on, Noah, is like, yes, we've had this huge cost decline in solar panels and batteries, and it's awesome. But it's like, those are things that like the US invented and then China scaled up, right? So like, if the question is like, is the US like capable of like scaling inventions of the same kind anymore? Like I think there's still like unproven. You're right to like note like there's a ton of manufacturing investment. Like it is the output isn't like totally there. Like obviously like Tesla's doing like gigafactory battery stuff.
But what about Tesla?
Tesla's starting.
They've been the trendsetter.
So it's starting, but like in terms of like what is the driver behind it? It's like Chinese society like willing to like foot the sort of the inconveniences and like the being willing to like not bear like the NIMBY costs or whatever of actually like doing the scaling. right? And if you
Well,
like,
maybe so,
I don't know.
but
So like I want something that we scale. I want something that like is like definitively it's like the US scales up.
well, two things. Number one, I think that you're really underrating Tesla's impact in the battery, industry, because for many years, now, Chinese battery producers have caught up to the frontier, I'd say, or pretty close, and are even, pioneering some new stuff like sodium-ion batteries, and that's great. Go China. But but for decades, Elon Musk and Tesla, that was driving batteries. That was the frontier. And we had the gigafactories here in America. We did actually scale those up, and that did push down cost. The main technological innovation, the sort of incremental innovation that we got from scaling, was better data to calibrate the software that tells where the little pokey spikes are that poke through your separator in your battery, so you don't have your battery explode, so you can pack more energy into a battery, right? And we got that was pretty cool. We got that from Tesla. Like, Tesla pioneered that, and then that takes scaling up. And then, of course, all the factory scaling and all those kind of things too. Tesla's really good. The other thing is space launch. If you look at space launch, if you net SpaceX out of the equation, it's like China, America. But then if you add SpaceX, it's like America, and it's like, and it's like we just kick the crap out of China with just this one company. So I'd say that it's the problem is that only Elon Musk has figured out how to scale up manufacturing in America. We've got this one guy who's done it twice, and everyone else who's done it 0 times, and that's a big problem. But we can also learn from Elon Musk. If he's not busy shit posting on Twitter, maybe we could get him to go to some other companies and say, "Hey, how did you do this?" And then get some actionable ideas. And so I talked to a lot of kind of hard tech entrepreneurs, deep tech entrepreneurs, who say that's what we need to do. We need to basically reproduce the Elon Musk secret sauce, which is, of course, what we did with Elon Musk's progenitor, Henry Ford. Everybody else copied Ford's factory innovations and scaling innovations. And then, we got the great auto industry and the great manufacturing industries of the early 20th century. And so I think, space, reusable rockets, which have absolutely changed the game in space, and batteries for cars are two industries where we have successfully scaled, and there have been physical things where you'd think NIMBYs might kill it.
Yeah. So I mean, I obviously I agree with a lot of that. Like, the SpaceX is just such an amazing story, and it's just absolutely incredible what they have done and are still doing. With the Starlink constellation, with like building Starship, it's like super exciting to watch. I think, like, in terms of like copying Elon, right? I think like the best hope is for like ex SpaceX employees, right, or ex Tesla employees, like who like kind of learn the like Elon's like way of doing things, and then go out and like start new companies, or
work for other companies, work for companies who are scaling up. Be a CTO somewhere.
Maybe.
Bill Knudsen. Bill Knudsen is the example, right?
It's super.
Bill Knudsen. He's the guy in Freedom's Forge. He's the protagonist of Freedom's Forge. He's the guy who learned. He built out a new division. He built out the Chevrolet division at GM and scaled up. He had learned from Ford, from working at Ford, then left and basically was took this to GM and scaled up, actually past Ford for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a good example. But GM wasn't a new company. Well, it wasn't he didn't found it, but he founded a division at it. So he was like, they didn't really have CTOs then, but he would have been CTO.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so that can happen, but I think it's like the sort of like the legacy incumbents are like pretty ossified these days. And I think you do get a benefit from like doing something new and sort of just,
I agree.
Not having all the technical debt of like corporate institutions, right? And so if I was gonna like place my bet on like how a like U.S. manufacturing renaissance happens, it's like a lot of new companies, not like Boeing suddenly getting more innovative.
That may be true. I do think that there's, Boeing has actually shown a desire to sort of do little entrepreneurship or have a division do its own thing. This has been a big problem. The 737, was made at a different location, and it was supposed to be all independent and stuff like that. And they failed. They sucked, but they at least showed a willingness to do that. So maybe Boeing will do that, but I agree. Like, I think startups are really important. It's, as a side note, it is very good to see industrial policy being split between supporting incumbents and supporting startups. And so that's one thing that the people who designed the IRA and the CHIPS Act were really on top of. Like, you see, it's not, I was worried that the CHIPS Act was going to be just chunking a bunch of money at Intel, but it turns out there's actually huge support for startups and IRA as well. So I'm kind of encouraged by that. And you're absolutely right. And so, of course, NIMBYs are a giant problem, right? We all know NIMBYs are a problem. We can sit here and rail about NIMBYs, and I think they are a giant problem. But I think that SpaceX's story shows that when you can overcome the NIMBY problem, America isn't uniquely dysfunctional in some other way. And I think that that when you have a country that starts losing some manufacturing industries, people tend to get this sort of inferiority complex about, so for example, in the 1980s, everyone said, Japan is out competing us in autos because Japanese line workers are more productive because, they like, but then a couple things happened. Number one, Japan then came and built factories in Tennessee, and it measures very carefully the productivity of its line workers. And the Tennessee people achieved 98% of the productivity of the Japanese workers. And so, the Japanese workers were 2-ish% more productive, but that's nothing.
That's fine.
And that's fine. And so, and then also very careful measures were done in other industries and found that in most manufacturing industries, American was actually the line workers were more productive than in Japan by a little, again, by a small amount. But so not that big a difference. But the point is that we get this inferiority complex, like our workers just suck, blah, blah, blah. But no, it's institutions and it's the ecosystem. It's the suppliers, it's the markets, it's the, blah, blah, blah. And so I really think that we underrate our own ability to do manufacturing stuff. We are able to do it. We simply have to overcome the problems. Do it in Texas because, we're a bunch of effete coastal geeks, right? Sitting out here. Where do you live again?
I'm in the DC area, so totally
DC,
guilty as charged.
You're living in DC. Yeah. We're living in San Francisco. We're surrounded by a bunch of people who don't want to build anything, right? Because they all make their money, just like in things that don't require you to build anything. But in Texas, people are like, let's build it. Like Texas is a thing that is a part of America, right? And then, and I think that there's other places too, like Alabama is building stuff, Tennessee is building stuff. Right now, there's a whole bunch of America that's just dedicated to mining and farming, but that would build stuff if we built it there, right? And so we've got to get, there are political issues. Like Colorado would be a great place to build stuff if Colorado NIMBYs allowed it. And the fact that we sort of, California sent like an elite squad of granola munching hippies to take over Colorado, and they did. And then, and then decided, let's do the same thing we did in California and never build anything. And then, so that's a problem, right? And there's this blue state coastal culture of just assuming that your wealth will be handed to you from an existing clustering effect, or like finance or government or just this existing software cluster in San Francisco. That's a big problem. We've got to overcome that. But let's not sit around and just yell at that all day as our life, right? Because Texas exists.
Hey, everybody. Erik here with a word from our sponsors. If you're a startup founder or executive running a growing business, you know that as you scale, your systems break down and the cracks start to show. If this resonates with you, there are 3 numbers you need to know: 36,000, 25, and 1. 36,000. That's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamline accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind, so you get a customized solution for all your KPIs in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need all in one place. Right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist, designed to give you consistently excellent performance, absolutely free, at netsuite.com/102. netsuite.com/102. to get your own KPI checklist. NetSuite.com/102.
Yeah, I would say like the other thing that comes to mind, talking about SpaceX specifically, is like, or Elon's style of engineering in general, is like one thing that I think he does that is extremely important. He iterates rapidly, right? And it's sort of like SpaceX is known for taking like a capital rich approach to development, where they, on Starship they have like a bunch of prototypes that blew up on like kind of on purpose, like they knew they would probably blow up. They're obviously trying to make it successful, but they're kind of like okay with like failure, and same with like trying to land the Falcon 9. They had like multiple failures of like landings before they got a success, and so it's a highly iterative approach where like you allow yourself to fail if necessary, and then you make the tweaks and adjustments to on engineering. You kind of figure out what went wrong, and you do it that way. And then if you compare like the way that other like legacy rocket companies have done things, is that they design end to end, like to where it's like perfect and like human rated, and it costs like many billions of dollars more, but then like it flies the sort of the first time. Like this is what happened with the SLS, for example, and it's like human rated. It's going to fly humans, which SpaceX is still not even doing on Starship, but like it costs many billions of dollars more, and it's like $4 billion per launch, like going forward. So it's a much worse approach. And there's a lot of parts of the economy where like I think space is unique in the sense that like there is no safety regulation, right? Or like very little. And like you are allowed to like put out like a half-baked product and try it and field it and see if it fails. And in like large parts of the economy, you can't do that. I think like cars is like relatively good because there's a lot of safety regulation, but it is sort of enforced via like a surveillance mechanism. So if something turns out to be wrong with your car, like they do mandatory recalls, and the manufacturer has to fix it, and that's good, that's fine.
Aircraft too, as you know, right?
No, airplane is actually very different. Airplanes everything is like complete pre-market approval, right? So you have to. So it's much more similar to like the way the legacy aerospace companies design rockets, in that like you design it end to end to be like perfect, or it's never going to actually be perfect, but as close as you can to perfect. And then you get FAA to sign off on it, and then you can build it. And so like you don't get to go through that process of iteration in an area like aircraft. And so I worry about that as another like modality aside from NIMBYism. It's like this like unwillingness to tolerate like any sort of like risks of iteration in society.
Maybe so, but what I've noticed is that America has a bunch of small aircraft manufacturing companies headquartered in some little town in Iowa you've never heard of.
Sure.
And like it's hard to scale up to making like wide body aircraft. Like the number of companies in the world who know how to do that is possibly 3, but really just
it's
2.
3.
It's
well,
2 to 3.
But,
can maybe do it. And so that's really, really, really hard. And of course, but okay, so one cool thing about Embraer is that it showed like Japan tried and failed to make a aircraft company for many years, and Korea never even tried. They're like, no, screw that, we're not doing that. Europe had to massively subsidize it. America created a total of 1, and then Brazil comes in and creates just this awesome aircraft company out in the middle of nowhere. So that's something that America could do better. We could have a company besides Boeing making that, but then Boeing and if you're in 2010 or 2005 or something, there is absolutely no reason not to just buy from Boeing and Airbus. They are amazing. They're just, everything works, everything's fine, like and they can deliver these incredibly high volumes at low cost, and we're just like, okay, I'll buy your whatever they're selling. What's the top selling Airbus one? Remind me.
A320.
Yeah, we'll just buy your A320. Why the hell not? Buy another one.
Yeah.
Click. And then like now with Boeing starting to show some problems, there's potential for us to have another one that comes in, but only one. Like we can only have one other big Boeing type company. We're
It's
not
so
going to
hard,
have 7 Boeings, right? We don't,
Yeah,
because
no,
like
no, right.
it's not an airplane is a bus. It's not a car. The reason we have multiple car companies is because people love different styles and models and of cars. That's what in fact, Bill Newton discovered. He was like, Ford is like, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And he's like, different colors for everybody, different models per year, planned obsolescence, which is, maybe wasteful resources, but who cares? And so then like that was a big deal. And aircraft, you can't really do that because people are like, ooh, new shape of the cockpit. Who cares? Like, no one,
Well,
it's a bus. It's a utility thing.
Your product is like basically determined by physics, right? Like you're like shaping it in a way to like make it as efficient as possible. As whatever speed you're going for. Yeah,
sure. And no one cares. Like it's not determined by consumer preferences. It is a utility. It is a piece of infrastructure. It is a bus. Like no one cares about how awesome like we like buses to look awesome, but we don't need a new cool, like personalized, individualized, awesome bus. Therefore, since it's not driven by consumer preferences, you're not going to get the preference for variety that drives this massive proliferation of car companies.
I mean, I think there's not going to be like a ton of airline makers ever, but I think that there are more dimensions for progress. So like one is obviously speed, right? Like I spent part of my career at Boom working on supersonic airliners. I think the other dimension, and we are like massively stagnating in speed. Like we know how to do a Mach 2 airplane. Like Concorde went Mach 2, and we don't have it anymore. So it's like another poster child for the great stagnation continuing. The other dimension would be something like you could imagine an airplane that is smaller that is operate. You can have an airline that operates like smaller airplanes without like as many crew and without as many, maybe even unpiloted, right? Like an unmanned thing. And then you can go from smaller airports. There's 5,000 or something like that, like public use airports in the U.S., and we basically use 30 of them. Being able to fly from like small airport to small airport, like like an Uber or something like that. Like that would be another dimension where you could conceive of like pretty significant progress in aviation. And then if you're dealing with much smaller, the crazy thing about airplane programs is that their complexity is like the cost of the programs is exponential with maximum takeoff weight. So like the bigger the airplane, like the much more expensive is the program. So I think like I'm a believer really in smaller planes, not big airlines. And we've seen already, like you said, like the 737 and the A320 are the dominant airliners, right? It's not like the wide bodies and stuff like actually like we use them like for transatlantic and transpacific stuff, but like for the most part, like smaller is the smaller planes are like winning in terms of like the market share. Smaller airliners, and we could go even smaller, especially as we get more autonomy and that starts.
Yeah. But I still want a plane with an upper deck like a 747. That looks so good.
It was so cool. Yeah.
It was. I want that again. I want that, even if it increases drag a little bit. I want it. I don't know if it does or not. I demand it as a consumer.
No. I mean, it was pretty like thermodynamically efficient for its time, right? Like it works fine. Yeah, I think the problem with airplanes being big is, as always, it's like airline economics, and you got to fill all the seats. So you got to fly on routes where you can fill all the seats. So I looked in at one point, like, could I buy up all the used like A380s, and so only flew like the double decker Airbuses that are even bigger than the 747s, and it's like pretty hard to make that work. It turns out, but I was.
Are those all going to be retrofitted as cargo planes for the military?
I don't know what's going to happen. I think they're going to be bought up by like Saudis who want like an A380, like private jet or something like that.
I see. Thanks, Saudis. Okay, so but it'll just they'll have it be a build like housing at NEOM or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so but do you know Ian Brook?
Yeah. I am one of Ian's early investors. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, so the other day I was at a party. And, people are like, there's techno music, but no one's dancing. It's at some warehouse, in San Francisco. And it's a bunch of, AI tech people. And then I'm standing at this party, and then this guy taps me on the shoulder. He's like, hey, want to see a jet engine? And I was like, yeah. And that was Ian Brook. And then his jet engine was in the back of that warehouse. And I don't know how. I'm sure he didn't like bring it over in an Uber. Like he just that was his workshop. And then I saw the jet engine.
Yeah.
You know, he explained some of how it worked. And then there are cool things being done in the aircraft space. And I don't, you know, obviously that the thing he's doing will solve mostly the lesser problem of international flights, the big international flights going really fast. Like that would be the Concorde times 10, right? Plus it'll be useful for missiles.
No, I think it's exactly what the industry needs. So it's super efficient at like high speed and low speed. So if you have like a single cycle engine, right, it's only efficient at cruise speed. And so
Right.
so being able to make it like efficient across like everything means like you solve a ton of problems. And you know, when I spent most of my time on it, boom, was landing and takeoff noise. So like how loud can the airplane be at takeoff, right? And if he's just using a fan at takeoff, then that's going to be a lot quieter, and so that solves that problem as well. So it's like yes, that's exactly the kind of innovation we need in aerospace. And he's like a super scrappy guy, and he's like making it happen.
That's awesome. We're getting in the weeds here, Erik.
Yeah, let me zoom out a bit. Although that was great discussion. Eli, what would you need to see to determine whether the Great Stagnation is over? What indicators? And then secondly, on the statistics, is it possible that AI won't show up in the productivity statistics? You wrote a post about that. Where do you net out on that too?
Yeah. So I mean, I think obviously, like if we saw a big jump in TFP, like I take Noah's point that it's like not reliable data in like sort of the short run. But like if we saw it tick up and sort of, you know, had a few years of TFP growth, like that would excite me. I think the other thing is like physical statistics, right? So like if you look at like energy consumption per capita in the US, like it peaked in the 1970s, primary energy consumption per capita. Late, like 1977, 1978, that was the peak, right? If we can start like getting that to tick upward, like that would excite me, right? Like sort of, I mean, we're just talking about airplanes, right? But like maximum transatlantic travel speeds, right? If that starts going up, like that gets me excited. I think other costs of transportation in general, right? Like, so if we get like true autonomy on the roads and sort of these like fleets of autonomous vehicles, that's super exciting. In terms of AI, I'm in sort of like a wait and see kind of approach to AI because like I get the potential, but I think that there's still so many governance problems that we have in terms of being able to like deploy new things that that it's not obvious that AI is going to be able to do like live up to its full potential in let's say a field like healthcare, right? Like where you have the FDA like basically requiring proof that something is safe before it's allowed on the market at all. You don't get that rapid iteration that you need to have really fast growth. So this is like we're in a world where the rate of progress in like biology, like fundamental biology, is so rapid right now. Is insane, and like yet medical practice is not changing like that fast at all. And so there's that disconnect, and it's not clear that AI will translate. It will definitely like produce continued gains in the biotech labs, but you know, like getting it to the point where it's actually like affecting consumers, that's a way harder proposition. And I think like an example of sort of like past disappointment is, I would say, like the internet, right? Like I thought, for example, that the internet was going to destroy realtors, right? Like you'd just be able to like list your house on a website and there would be no fees, right? Or like there would not be like a 6% like transaction fee when you buy and sell real estate. And it like turns out that totally didn't happen. Like we you know, like maybe like there's some like deterioration of market power, but not much. And so it's like still like very high transactions costs for real estate transactions, and that should have been solved by the technology, right? And so my question is like, whether the same thing is going to happen with AI in terms of we won't, for like social reasons, allow it to actually like reach the productivity potential that it should be able to take us to. I think it will like absolutely revolutionize media. Like I think there's going to be like so much, like we're already swimming in content, but like if we throw AI into the fire, there's going to be a million times more even. What's the marginal value of that? I don't know. I already feel like I have too much content and I don't have time for it all. But in sort of like the industrial sectors, I think like the obstacle is much more like social and governance rather than the technology per se. So I would love for it to revolutionize everything. I'm not holding my breath for it though. I'm much more like I would say like techno-optimist, but like socio-pessimist.
Well, let me. So I did not expect to be the more optimistic guy in this argument, but I am. So I'll do that. Okay. So the Henry Adams curve. It's per capita energy use, right? And it's going up, up, up. And then it was like then 70s and it's like, and then like that website, What the Fuck Happened in 1971, which always annoys me because it's actually 1973 and it's
1973. Yeah, but they want to make it all about monetary policy, right?
No, because that changed in 1973 too.
Yeah.
That was also 1973. Nothing happened in 1971. You just slightly misread the graph.
Yeah.
No, it's 1973, and it was that's when Bretton Woods ended, but that's also when the oil shock hit.
Yeah,
and which will always lead to infinite arguments about which one did which. But anyway, so it was 1973, and we rolled off the Henry Adams curve right in 1973, and then and we never got back to it. So energy use per capita, right? What can you use energy for? Well, you can use it for transportation. You can use it to get from place to place. And of course, this has massive, social stuff. You can use it for, like if you're going to have cars drive faster on the road. Well, you can't because they'll crash because they're made by humans, right? And so at some point, if driverless cars are able to drive 15 miles an hour faster without crashing, which is probably about as good as they could do, that will be a marginal improvement, but I don't think we're getting much improvement in that. Airplanes maybe, but people don't. Yeah, so airplanes, yeah, you could use air travel, and I don't think it's going to come from like, with all respect to Boom, I don't think it's going to come from like supersonic hops, between cities. I think maybe a little bit will come from that, like, but I think it's always that's I think it's going to come from like quadcopters and small, basically helicopters of some sort. Carrying you from place to place. Yeah. Because that's just unlocking a whole new dimension of like how to get you from place to place through the sky. And once you get, we have computerized air traffic control for that can route like a whole bunch of people through the sky. We'll get, when we get noise, we'll need noise under control, and we'll need some other stuff. And then, and of course, people have to believe it's completely safe. But I think that, a few people being carried by a helicopter or like, things being carried quickly, like packages being carried quickly or parts being carried quickly by helicopter will be a thing. Energy we can use industrially in robots. And I think that there's not a lot of regulatory barriers to that.
Yeah.
There's nobody who's like, I don't want that robot near me. I think that robots are going to be a big deal. We're already seeing people in factories use robots to carry parts from one place to another. And I would note that when you actually look at the micro stuff of why manufacturing increased in productivity so steadily for so long, I think you see it's because they found better ways to carry things from one workstation to another, and that they kept finding better ways to do that again and again. And that's why humans have been so good. We're now having robots carry things from workstation to workstation and route things within the factory. And that's all our factories are going to be just robots and robot tenders once we get that, because that's really what, and once we get the last mile of like robots being able to look at little defects and like micro batch defects kind of thing. And like, oh, this needs to be ground a little more. And so then we'll get much more productivity improvements, and manufacturing will continue to be automated. And that's good. We want that. There's a lot of other ways in which robots could be useful. So like the robots that fold your laundry, clean your house. So the other thing is appliances. So home stuff. And I would note, by the way, that improvements in home production, which means chores and childcare, do not show up in productivity statistics directly. They only show up when you increase labor supply because people have more time for things to do, which takes a while and is not, is incomplete because sometimes people take more leisure, blah, blah, blah. Economics. There's our cold open me just going, yeah.
No, I totally agree.
But okay, so robots,
right?
appliances.
Conceptually, that should be counted.
And of course, I don't want to just plug a company that I invested in, but my friend Sam D'Amico is making this company Impulse that does that'll allow you to have much more powerful appliances. So you can have a commercial dryer in your house to dry your clothes super fluffily instead of this energy saving piece of crap that we have. And then you'll be able to have that, and energy will be really cheap because of really cheap solar power during the day will charge your battery, and then you can even run your dryer at night off the battery. But you can really blast it, with this battery. And so then we'll be able to have super powered appliances in our home, robots that fold our laundry, robots that do things that muscle power has previously been doing, right? All these little tasks we run around doing, like, hey, get me some tea. Robot walks over, gets you tea, hands you a tea. Like, hey, clean up my rabbit's hay feeding area because he strewed a bunch of hay all over the ground. Okay. And then so you do that, and then the rabbit jumps on the robot, of course. And then and so there's lots of things you can do. I really think home appliances were a big part of the story of the Henry Adams curve. We got things like dryers and washers, and later dryers and dishwashers, and then we got all these home appliances, air conditioners and whatnot, stoves and heaters and God knows what. And so we got all these things. We're going to see a wave of appliances that increase personal energy use that are not necessarily subject to regulatory approval because it's in your house. And one thing Americans already have is giant houses. Obviously, so we never had productivity increases in construction. I would like to say that, yes, construction industry massively, hurt by NIMBYs, right? We need to get rid of that. We could talk about that all day. But and construction productivity has been in decline for a long time, but it never really increased very fast at all. And in China, where they just, they don't have NIMBYs because they just throw them in re-education camps. In China, construction productivity hasn't increased. In fact, it's actually gone down. And, even when you're willing to build with crappy materials and you have no NIMBYs, construction productivity has been stagnant. And their shift to construction as a result, deliberate result of their economic policy, is one reason why their productivity stagnated in the 2010s, because all they were doing is construction. So even China without the NIMBY problem has this issue. Japan tried absolutely everything to increase productivity in construction. They had robots walking up the side of buildings, building as they went. They made skyscrapers on their side. They did everything, and their construction productivity did increase, and it was just very small. Like the increases are very small. So even if we get rid of the NIMBYs, which we need to do, even if we beat the NIMBYs and scale up, construction is not going to, be this giant TFP driver. And yet we already have these big houses. We can put appliance in the houses. We already have big factories, out in the middle of nowhere where no one cares. We can put the robots in the factories, right? And we'll do stuff with air travel too. We'll do self-driving cars, and we'll get so much cheaper primary energy production from solar, right? Like you've got, obviously that is a thing we really need to defeat NIMBYs in order to do, but I think we will eventually. But already we're building like a ton of solar. Like countries are just building out a ton of solar because it's cheap as hell.
Yep.
Wind will lose to NIMBYs, by the way.
So it sounds like you agree with
solar
me.
Will win.
Like there's like a huge opportunity to like apply more energy.
Yes.
Right? Like we could have more energy, and like that would be really good.
Yes.
And so
without magical fusion power,
but we haven't seen like the curve tick up yet, right? Like we haven't seen like the primary energy per capita curve like really move up. So like I think
of
that
course
would be
not.
like
solar's
what I'm saying
still
is
like
that
10%.
would be an indicator. That would be an indicator to me that like the Great Stagnation is ending. Is like when that we have like a reversal in that the Henry Adams curve.
Well, hopefully, I mean, we are smart. We keep track of these trends. Hopefully we can see things coming before they happen. Like most people are just like, oh, I guess that was a good decade.
Yeah.
But like, I think we can can sort of see things coming. We understand the fundamental drivers. We can see that like solar power is a small enough piece of primary energy generation currently, although it's ramping up at an exponential rate, we can see it's still so small that we couldn't expect it to lead yet to the abundance of energy that we're going to get. But we can project curves. We can look at possibilities. We can say, okay, look, if solar becomes 40% of our energy use, here's how much electricity costs will go down. We can say that, we can see that. And so,
totally.
that's our strength.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Like I'm a techno-optimist, right? Like I'm just a socio-pessimist too, right? And I want to see it happen, right? Like that's the thing. Is like I want to make sure that it happens and we don't celebrate like prematurely.
All right, fair enough. So I agree. Erik is just, I don't know what's going on with Erik's. He needs to install better home internet. But yeah, so when I say, I think socio-pessimism is usually useless, often counterproductive. Because I think that ultimately the impact of technology is is human mediated. The impact of technology is giving humans the human society's collective ability to make more choices, right? Sometimes technology gives us individually more choices, but it always gives us socially more choices. It always allows society to do things it could never do before and organize itself in new ways that it didn't before. Technology doesn't happen without society making the choices for technology to happen. I think you agree. I think that I am techno-optimist because I believe society will generally choose to use the technologies in beneficial ways. I think it is to be a techno-optimist in the narrow sense of, I think, engineers will invent cool new stuff this week. Well, yes, I am that too. But, I think that there's a broader sense of techno-optimism in which I believe that human society will take this and use this for the good of humanity overall in general. And so I think that I do believe we will build a lot of solar power.
Yeah.
When we get down to the nitty gritty of it, when we look at which new technologies society could or might easily block, it's solar NIMBYism, right? It's will we get cheaper primary energy via solar because people won't allow solar to be built on land? That's it. Like I don't think we're going to see, for example, mining NIMBYism in Chile or wherever, such that we can't mine lithium or the new lithium deposits we've gotten. I think we will mine that.
We have mining NIMBYism in the U.S. though.
We have some. But we do a hell of a lot of mining.
The Thacker Pass lithium mine was going to be like the biggest lithium mine in the world, was sued on the grounds by like the sort of like 3 tribes that were nearby. We're like, this is like our sacred land and you can't mine here. And, that does happen, right? We don't do a lot of mineral mining in the U.S. We don't do a lot of mineral processing in the U.S. because some of those processes are environmentally kind of nasty, and we export,
and we're not going to, but
environmental damage to like other countries.
Yeah, we're going to do a lot of that in Indonesia and Mexico. But that's fine. They need if you're like, oh well, actually the economic activity is more important than the environmental externality, get over it, you stupid tree huggers. Well, then it's like, guess who needs money? Indonesians. They're poor. And so fine, if that's your idea, then all you have to do is ignore the few green protesters will be like, we're doing all this mineral processing in Indonesia. They don't even know what mineral processing is. Anyway, the point is that stuff's going to be fine. The problem with that is that it was concentrated in China, so it has China risk.
Yeah.
And then in the future, it will not be, because there's a lot of poor countries who can do this and they can make a lot of money doing it. We do not need mineral processing. The only reason we need mineral processing in America is for national security in case of but by the time we get to that point, by the time we get to we need an America instead of Mexico, we're fucked. We're losing that war badly by that point. And so I think that mineral processing is fine. Mining is going to be fine. We mine a lot in America. I'm sorry. America has
we mine a lot of oil and gas.
We mine a lot of oil and gas.
We do mine a lot of oil and gas. We don't do a lot of minerals.
Excluding oil and gas, it's $137 billion of mining, the gross output of the mining industry. And excluding support services for mining as well. $137 billion, that's a big industry, man. It's like how much is software? And we can't pump up the prices of mining by slapping a cool new label on a piece of copper or something.
Eli, what would make you less of a government pessimist? And what would be the highest leverage thing we could do to get there?
If we could repeal NEPA, right? That would be I don't think that solves our problems 100%. That would be like a very big step in the right direction that I think like probably 80% of the political spectrum would support if they knew enough about it. And so it's like a thing that we should probably do. And like not being able to do that makes me like, it makes me cognizant of like how much just stasis and how much like inertia we like our legal system has. But like that's like, to me, like that's like the number one uh, indicator is like if we can do something seriously, either seriously reform or get rid of the National Environmental Policy Act, that would give me like a lot more hope and excitement, and that we would like be able to overcome some of these problems.
So can we repeal it, or what needs to happen for that to happen?
I don't know. So we had like a tiny bit of reform in the last debt ceiling bill. It basically did nothing. I think we're just going to keep bumping up against it, because what we're trying to do is like deploy a ton of new clean energy resources, like Noah said, right? We're trying to build like a lot of solar, but a lot of other stuff, a lot of transmission and pipelines for hydrogen and battery factories that we're subsidizing and so on, and like all of that stuff we're just going to keep running into like if we're trying to actually transition away from fossil fuels, that requires like a lot of building where the federal government is involved, and NEPA is just going to keep being an obstacle over and over and over again. So I think it's like the issue will not go away until it's resolved. I think it's like pretty impossible to imagine like a really successful green transition without like some sort of permitting reform.
Noah, where do you stand on what would make you less of a government pessimist?
I mean, what would make me less of a government pessimist? A big war. I think that the obviously, NEPA is a big problem. Everybody knows this. It's kind of an old story. It's not the only problem either. There's a lot of other problems that like we almost use NEPA as a mental shorthand for, with permitting and with other stuff as well. Financing is actually a much bigger problem than anyone realizes. Like financing of construction turns out to be a much bigger deal than people realize. But that's a subject for many other episodes. But I think that with these things, you can take basically two minds. You can say, okay, well, here's a thing we need to change. Here's an obstacle we need to overcome. And you can say, here's an obstacle we'll never overcome. I'm going to just whine. Do not be the second guy. Do not be number two. Do not use, and also the idea that like, you're like, well, government can't get anything done until we just repeal government. Then we won't get anything done. Just this sort of like a ineffectual sad sack libertarianism of like, I give up, like the world sucks. Nothing can ever be done. While meanwhile, like SpaceX is out there building like the fucking rocket industry in whole new cities out there in Texas. Yeah. Like this sort of the pacifist pessimism of like, it's government has destroyed everything. We can't fall into that. We've got to be like, okay, well, we live in a society that people will, there will be some restraints on what people are able to do. We've got to work out a social compromise that allows us to get stuff done. That involves things like federalism. Go build stuff in Texas. That involves things like permitting reform. That involves things like finding a, sort of a national reason, like competition with China to do things that will unite the parties to some degree. And that there's a lot of things that, YIMBYs, you could just be a YIMBY pessimist and say, well, nobody wants apartment buildings. But like California is passing a bunch of NIMBY laws, and there's this big national movement, and every city is now trying to do YIMBY laws. And in fact, we have started building more housing, and rents have moderated. And so in real terms, not just nominal. And so being this super pessimist, also, that like AEI's famous curve of like this expensive service industries. Yeah, but if you look at it over the last decade, then service, except for hospital services, which still have increased by more than wages, everything else, all the other big ticket services like childcare and whatever education have all gotten more affordable for the average wage earner. or family, or et cetera, over the last decade. Okay, so that's a decade. Like, you know, the most important curve ever shows stuff beginning decades ago, right? And we haven't but still, over the last decade, if you draw that curve, you see that most of the big ticket services getting more affordable. So like this, you know, the sort of pacifist throw up your hands pessimism that I see sort of starting to creep into, you know, some libertarian thought needs to go. You know, like, yes, you're going to have to deal with some dorks out in some community, like, you know, in like SoCal, who are like, well, we don't want those buildings out here. And then, no, you're going to have to deal with that. And maybe you don't go to SoCal, maybe you go to Nevada, maybe you go to Arizona, maybe you go to Tennessee, you know, and of course, Texas. And so, but then, like, yes, we're going to deal with that, but we're going to deal with that. Like, there's no point in being a pessimist about it. It doesn't help.
I mean, I to be clear, like, I think we need to do it. Like, I agree with you, right? Like, I don't think we have any other choice. We have to, like, overcome these obstacles. I just think, like, I'm very conscious of the obstacles. And so when I see people being, like, just purely techno-optimistic without, like, thinking about, like, okay, well, how are we going to overcome these obstacles? Like, I just want to be like, okay, great that you're optimistic about the technology, but now let's fix things.
Passive optimism and passive pessimism are both bad.
We have a hard stop, so let's wrap on that. Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Noah.
Thanks for having me.